rising tensions of the Cold War, the US Army and the Soviet Union were on the brink of mass destruction. Amid this crucial standoff, one order had the potential to wipe mankind off the face of the earth. Fortunately, Vasily Arkhipov, a Soviet naval soldier, had a different idea, of which played a pivotal role in stopping this atrocity. While facing a high-tension level, Vasily displayed an exceptional amount of courage. His refusal to endorse any deployment of a destructive nuclear bomb, despite the backlash, ultimately spared the globe from mass destruction. Although his actions might have been seen as reckless at the time, history stands to be a testament to the importance of his selfless thinking. Who is this Vasily Arkhipov, and how did he single-handedly save the world from going extinct? This is the story of the man who prevented world destruction. The 30th of January 1926 was another regular day for the people of Staraya Kupovna, a town near Moscow. But it was the day a child was born into the Arkhipov family. Vasily's family was one of modest means, as his father worked as a laborer in a local factory while his mother managed the household. Nevertheless, the Arkhipov family upheld one value amid the hardships they faced: education. Setting him off on a good start, Vasily's parents encouraged him to pursue his studies, a mission that would prove fruitful in kickstarting Vasily's naval career. In little time, the sense of discipline and resilience instilled in him from his upbringing shot him up to the top of his class, not only in the Pacific Higher Naval School he attended, but also after transferring to the Azerbaijan Higher Naval School. This was a man who was known for excellence in all ramifications, but interwoven between his spurts of academic intelligence was a golden trait of being level-headed, a trait that would soon be tested as Vasily climbed the ladder of his naval career. Vasily went on to serve during the Soviet-Japanese War in 1945 aboard a minesweeper before graduating from the Azerbaijan Naval School in 1947. The real work for Vasily started after his graduation, as he served in the submarine service aboard boats in the Black Sea, Baltic, and Northern fleets. It was these experiences that prepared him for what would be the true test of his career. As Vasily Arkhipov climbed the ranks in the naval service, one event would cement his reputation for life. In 1961, Vasily Arkhipov had over a decade of experience in his arsenal, as well as a tricky situation before him. The Cold War was just at its peak, with the Soviet Union engaging in a race against the United States. The criteria for winning this game were simple: who could build and deploy more nuclear weapons? Both nations went to work. In the heat of this climbing Cold War, the Soviet Navy built K-19, one of the Union's first nuclear-powered submarines, and placed Vasily Arkhipov as the deputy commander and executive officer under Captain Nikolai Zatayev. This formidable submarine was launched in 1959 and equipped with nuclear ballistic missiles dangerous enough to wreak massive havoc once triggered. However, K-19 was built in a rush because of the rising tension surrounding the Cold War, and on July 4, 1961, the flaws of the once enviable submarine rose to the surface. After conducting patrol exercises on the southeast coast of Greenland, the submarine developed a huge leak in its reactor coolant system. In no time, the cooling system was failing, and the submarine was facing risks of a meltdown and possible nuclear explosion. There was chaos in the K-19. Under the order of Captain Nikolai, Vasily led the engineering crew to develop an immediate solution to the impending nuclear meltdown. The men set to work under the unhealthy radiation levels for an extended period, and eventually built a secondary coolant system to avert the meltdown. However, this incident left the entire crew of the K-19 submarine irradiated, and over the next 2 years, a total of 22 crew members and sailors died from the after effects of that incident. In that unfortunate incident, Vasily Arkhipov demonstrated his organizational skills by leading the team to build a quick solution to the damaged coolant system. His ability to stay calm amid the acrid smell of impending death in that situation fanned order and morale among the crew during the crisis. As much as Vasily's leadership and crisis management skills were appreciated by the Soviet government, no one knew that Vasily's skills would soon be put to the test yet again in a more dangerous situation. The K-19 accident was remarkable, but it shadowed in comparison to this next event. In October 1962, the little game of nuclear weapons between the Soviet Union and the United States took a rather serious turn, bringing the world to the edge of nuclear war. The US discovered that the Cold War might be getting really heated when they discovered Soviet ballistic missile deployment in Cuba, which was just 90 miles away from the US mainland. The then President of the United States, President John F. Kennedy, could no longer sit still. He decided that this Soviet deployment in Cuba waters was a threat to national security and confronted the premier of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, asking them to retreat. However, the Soviet deployment of nuclear missiles in Cuba was only instigated by the United States' deployment of nuclear missiles in Italy and Turkey. The confrontation between the governments of the United States and the Soviet Union lasted 13 days, from the 16th to 28th of October 1962. And while they negotiated and butted heads, the world held their breath while expecting a positive result. But the physical confrontation was not only the activity taking place at that exact moment. Nuclear-armed submarines were still being dispatched by the USSR to the area around Cuba, and the US Navy was still scouting the water to unearth anything they could find. At this time, Vasily Arkhipov was already promoted and was the chief of staff of the flotilla of 4 submarines ordered to travel from Russia to Cuba. Vasily was appointed as the sub-commander of the B-59 attack submarine, which he traveled on, under Captain Valentin Grigorovich Savitsky. The 4 flotillas stayed underwater awaiting orders from Moscow to indicate their next line of action. However, there was a problem. Because the B-59 submarine was too deep underwater hiding from its American scouters, they could not monitor any radio traffic. At some point, they picked up some US civilian radio broadcasts, but the B-59 crew could not trust the American news over the instructions from the Soviet government in Moscow, so they waited. But on the 27th of October, they could no longer wait. A group of 11 United States Navy destroyers alongside an aircraft carrier, USS Randolph, had located the B-59. Once the diesel-powered, nuclear-armed Foxtrot-class B-59 submarine was fished out by the US near Cuba, all hell broke loose. A few minutes after confirming their discovery, the United States Navy started dropping non-lethal depth charges on the submarine to force the submarine to surface for identification. But underneath the loud blasts from the US Navy, the B-59 crew was in disarray. They were yet to hear from Moscow for many days and could not risk resurfacing without concrete information on whether a war had broken out or not. The B-59 was becoming unconducive for the crew due to prolonged underwater stay and was running low on battery power and oxygen. They had to move and move fast. Taking the lead, Captain Savitsky concluded that a war had begun and prepared to launch a T-5 nuclear torpedo in response to the blasts being dropped on the submarine. But to successfully launch the torpedo, he had to respect the standard protocol of obtaining consent from the 3 senior officers on board: the captain, the political officer Ivan Maslenikov, and the flotilla commander Vasily Arkhipov. This is where Vasily Arkhipov took a stance that would save the world. Among the 3 officers, and amid the burning panic in the submarine, Vasily Arkhipov did not consent to the launch of the nuclear weapon. Vasily was reported to have stayed calm, counseling the captain and crew members on the danger of launching the torpedo without concrete orders from Moscow. Vasily Arkhipov was the only soldier who entertained the idea that the charges being dropped on the B-59 could be warning depth charges and advised that they surface to find out. After an intense argument, Captain Savitsky listened to his sub-commander, ordered the submarine to surface, and found out that Vasily was right after all. The gravity of this single decision by Vasily went unnoticed at the time, but it later rose to the surface decades later as the deadliness of the situation was explored at the 40th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 2002. The T-5 nuclear torpedo that was set to launch was estimated to have about the same destructive power as the nuclear bomb that the United States dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. Everyone knew if that nuclear torpedo was released, there would have been a resulting global nuclear war, leading to a devastating loss of lives and properties, and scorching after effects of nuclear chemicals on civilians. This catastrophe was prevented by one man, Vasily Arkhipov, and history will always remember him for saving the world from destruction.